To get a good understanding of adding positive and negative numbers, we usually start with the easy numbers, meaning the integers. We're not talking about fractions or decimals, just the integers. So the integers have 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, on and on and on they go. And then there's the negatives, -1, -2, -3, and on they go in the negative direction. So as we add and subtract, a great way to think about it is to move on the number line. If I ask you to add 5 plus -8, that means I'm going to start at 5 right here. And when I go -8, negative means I'm going this direction. I'm going in the negative direction. So I'm going to count 8 spots. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And 5 plus -8 then is -3. Another example. If I ask you to add 10 plus -7, well, in this case I'd be starting at 10 and I'm going to go 7 in the negative direction. So if I count 7 in the negative direction, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, I end up at 3. On this next one, let's say that we were going to do -8 plus -3. Well, in this case, I'm going to start at -8, and I'm going to go 3 in the negative direction. 1, 2, 3. So -8 plus -3 is -11. Some more examples, and then we're going to get to subtraction. If we had -7 plus 11, I would be starting at -11, and I'm going to go 11 in the positive direction. So I'm going to count 11. Well, if I go 7, there I am at 0. That would be 7 to get to 0. I'm going to go 11. So 8, 9, 10, 11. So I end up right there. And -7 plus 11 ends up being 4. How about -3 plus -5? If I'm at -3 and I'm going to go 5 in the negative direction, I will go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and I end up right there at -8. Last addition example. How about -2 plus -10? I'm going to start at -2, and I'll go 10 in the negative direction. So if I go 10 in the negative direction, I end up right there at -12. Subtraction is a little bit trickier. When you're subtracting, you have to keep in mind, normally, when you subtract, you're going to go to the left. And normally, when you add, you're going to go to the right. The trouble you get into is when you subtract a negative. When you subtract a negative, you get those two negatives side by side. They end up canceling each other out, and you get a positive. So you've got to watch out for that double negative. We know that when we multiply, two negatives make a positive. Well, it's kind of the same situation. If you end up subtracting a negative, those two negatives end up making a positive. So we'll get to that in a moment here. Let's do some examples. Let's say I had 6 minus 10. So here I am at 6, and I'm subtracting. So I'm going to go to the left. I'm going to go 10 to the left. So I'll go 6 to the left to get to 0. And I have to go 4 more to go 10 to the left. 1, 2, 3, 4. And I end up right there at -4. If I had 3 minus 4. Here I am at negative 3. Again, I'm subtracting. I'm going to go 4 to the left. 1, 2, 3, 4. And I end up at negative 7. How about 11 minus 15? 11 minus 15, I'm at 11. And I'm going to subtract 15, so I'm going to go to get to 0. I'll subtract 11. Now I'm going to subtract 15, so I need to subtract 4 more. 1, 2, 3, 4. And I end up right there at negative 4. So for these last few examples, we're going to subtract a negative. And again, that's a situation where you get the two negatives. And I'm looking at something like this. Let's say it was negative 2 minus negative 8. So when you subtract a negative 8, what happens is the double negative there makes a positive. If you take away a negative, those two negatives end up making a positive. So this ends up really being negative 2 plus 8. So but before we think of it that way, let's think about this number line thing for a sec. Here I am at negative 2. When I subtract, I'd normally be going that way. But because I get this extra negative in here, that changes the direction. And I end up going 8 in the positive direction. So here I am. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So this ends up being 6. Negative 2 minus negative 8 is really negative 2 plus 8, which is 6. Another example. If I said 7 minus negative 4, this would end up being, I'm starting at 7, and when I subtract, I'm normally going to the left, but because there's this other negative, that flips the direction, and I end up going 4 to the right. So 1, 2, 3, 4. And again, the double negative makes a positive. This is really 7 plus 4, which is, of course, 11. How about negative 8 minus negative 4? So here I am at negative 8. If I was subtracting, I'd normally be going to the left. But because I'm subtracting a negative, that negative ends up flipping the direction, and I'll go 1, 2, 3, 4. I'll end up going 4 to the right. So this negative 8 minus negative 4 is really negative 8 plus 4, which ends up being negative 4.